Hello folks, and welcome to another video. It is another rant, if you will, but it is not a one-sided rant as we usually do on the channel. No, it's something that I've grown more nuanced in my opinion of the more that I've researched it and the more that I've finished reading the book. It is, of course, on the Lion's Return, as you can tell from the thumbnail. If you like what I do, the subscribe button is down below, the Patreon button is also down below. If you are a patron or a member of the channel, you will be registered for the monthly prize draw. The next one will be on the 6th of August, Sunday the 6th of August, and will be for £50 worth of free models from Composite Games, and a Dark Angels Command box set, as in the wonderful, the brilliant Deathwing Knights box set. That will be available for you as well. So those are the two things. I wanted to do the Lion this month because, you know, we do have that box set ready to give away. And if you are a member of the channel or you become a patron, no matter what level you do it at, you will be entered into the prize draw. Alrighty? Cool. And if you like what I do, please go and support Composite Games. They do a lot for the channel to make sure that we are, you know, giving away prizes and we're stable and we're doing good things for people in the hobby. So, go and support them if you can. We always need to look after smaller Warhammer retailers, and they are good people, so, you know, take it from me. So Lionel Johnson, his return has been, I did say terrible in my original script. I'm gonna say messy. Because there are certain things in the Lion's Return that I do actually quite like. So the Lion has returned. This is a great thing for those of us that want the 40k timeline to creep ever onwards. But has it been handled in a way that is conducive to the Lion himself and how he's been shown previously? Let's be honest here. You will find in this video that I really respect the direction the Games Workshop writing staff chose to go with the Lion. Right? I really do respect it. I also really love the fact that most of the lore is now coming at us straight up in book form, rather than a blurb in a codex somewhere. This is how it should be for the deeper parts of the lore, as we can explore it more. I really admire writers that take risks with their own writing, and this is one of those times, even if it misses the mark almost completely in my opinion. So I'd like to get that out the way. A doffing of the cap towards Games Workshop for trying something really left field for the Lion's Return. What is that return and what does it look like? Well, I will read it out here verbatim, the Cliff Notes version. Alright? Okie dokie. So, for those of you who know, if you're watching this video, you know that the Lion is asleep in the rock at this point. Okay? Cool. So, and I quote, "For reasons unknown, Lionel Johnson woke up in a mysterious mirror realm known as Mira Caliban in Millennium 42, without his memories. After millennia of sleeping since the original Caliban's destruction, after encountering the old king on the river, whose waters played a song that only he could hear, the Lion was approached by a watcher in the dark, and he asked it where they were. The diminutive figure would simply reply, 'Home,' before informing the Primarch of the king's condition and to beware the shadows that dwell near him. The Lion then moved on and discovered a domed building, but once more the Watcher appeared and warned the Primarch against entering it, stating he was not yet strong enough to safely do so. When an annoyed Lion asked what he should be doing instead to make sense of where he was, the Watcher told the Primarch to simply follow his nature. This led the Lion to follow the stench of corruption until the trees of Mira Caliban were replaced by those of the ruined world of Kamarth. It was there that the Primarch encountered the fallen angel Zabriel, which caused Lionel Johnson's memories to return to him." Okay. So, at this stage, right, I could carry on here, but at this stage the Lion is back in the 42nd millennium. The rest of the story is more about how he goes on dealing with the Fallen and things like that, and I don't want you to be spoiled about the book. It is a good book. It's a fine book, you know. In fact, do you know what? As a little treat, I'm going to read the rest of it. As a little treat. Let's get in there. I don't want to leave you hanging. So, as time went on, the Primarch learned how to freely enter Mira Caliban and use it to reach other worlds. This is from the Lion Son of the Forest novel, by the way. By focusing on where he wants to go, L. Johnson causes the location to slowly appear within the realm, until its forest finally fades away and the Primarch enters his destination. Here's the thing though, how was he thinking about Kamarth? These are the things that are never, ever shown, right? I just... It makes little sense how this realm works. This ability is known as the Forest Walk, which allows Lionel Johnson to take others with him upon these journeys, and the Primarch has used it to great effect in his battles against the Imperium's foes. Upon doing so, he is then teleported to another location, which Lionel Johnson discovers contains fallen angels. The Primarch does not know how. However, if this feeling that leads him to his wayward sons is an instinct, or is rather another force within Mira Caliban that is pulling him towards the fallen angels, the Lion has since formed a warband of loyalist fallen known as the Risen. Okay, literally leading a Chaos warband. Brilliant. I don't know about you, but this sounds like the Lion to me. I mean, Jesus Christ. Alongside Zabriel, his growing loyalist force of Risen, and the emerging Lion Guard Auxilia, Lionel Johnson worked to save his newly claimed region of the Imperium Nihilus from the 10,000 Eyes warband, battling the 10,000 Eyes on Kamarth and Avalus. On the world of Sable, Lionel Johnson was briefly captured by the fallen sorcerer Lord Seraphax. The fallen sorcerer revealed his intention to remove the lion's soul from his body and use it as a puppet to gain an audience with the Emperor. Seraphax would then use the lion's slaved form to kill the Emperor, which Seraphax believed would elevate the Master of Mankind to a new warp deity to destroy both Chaos and Xenos. However, thanks to the intervention of the Risen, the Lion was able to escape and defeat Seraphax. So, that's where I'm going to leave it. Okay. Messy, yes. Ridiculous, yes. But let me just read a little bit more about Mira Caliban, because that is the thing that we're going to be going into on this video a little bit more. So, Mira Caliban is a mysterious mist-shrouded realm that the Dark Angel's Primarch Lionel Johnson can enter at will. It resembles the ancient forest of his homeworld, Caliban. It is speculated by the Primarch to be a realm that is adjacent to the warp, which was perhaps conjured from L. Johnson's youthful memories, as he slumbered for millennia. The forest also never seems to end, no matter how far someone travels, and is home to the Watchers in the Dark and the great beasts that the Primarch once hunted. The only other inhabitant of Mira Caliban is an old wounded king, who slowly bleeds from his injuries and is always stalked by hungering shadows. Though he wishes to, the king cannot talk and simply stares into space, or directly at those he sees. According to a Watcher in the Dark, however, the king is capable of answering questions, should the right one be asked of him. He can either be found fishing in a boat on the river, or sitting within a castle that is located nearby. Wherever the king is, though, hungering shadows always reside close to him. They can be a threat to anybody who gains the shadow's attention, but they will never wander far from the old king's side. Alright. I like that. That reminds me of Dark Souls. I think the writer of this has been playing Dark Souls quite a bit, and has had some real direct inspiration from... I imagine that he wanders around like a Dark Souls character, just sitting there not saying anything, right? Like the end boss. And I do like the fact that maybe that's where the Emperor's soul is trapped. For some reason. I don't know. Somehow. But does that all sound like wishy-washy nonsense to you? It did to me. And then I read the book, and it still did. It still did. It still reads like pretty spurious nonsense to me. So I've split this video into 3 parts. I don't normally read out from the wiki because I don't like doing that, but I felt it was really important for you to get context into what we're talking about here, for you to know just what's happening with the Lion going forwards. There are 3 main problems with the Lion's return. The first is, what were we promised, right? The second is, esoteric nonsense forests. And the third is, the far too many cooks spoiling the broth. I'll cover each of them in turn, and we'll see what the Lion should look like and why this doesn't really represent who he is. So, the thing is, the first problem is, what were we promised by the lion and his story? For years, right? This is one of the oldest parts of the lion's lore. Okay, number one, the lion sleeping in the rock means that he should wake up in the rock. That's the promise that is made with him sleeping there, right? That is a definite promise that the writer makes to the reader. The lion is sleeping in the rock, and so when he wakes up, he will have an immediate reunion with his sons as the rock is about to fall, and that'll be a really good way to start, right? Chaos gets into the rock, it's about to take it and blow it up, and the lion wakes up, alright? And away we go. The issue is that Games Workshop already gave this return to their favoured son and character, Rabute Guilliman. The Black Legion are about to take and destroy Macragge, and up Guilliman gets. A miracle moment to be honest, a great moment of catharsis in the lore for many of its players. The issue is, this kind of return works better with the lion than it does for Guilliman. Games Workshop have painted themselves into a corner here. They use the secrets and lies of the Dark Angels to get away with some pretty spurious claims about what is going on in the wider world. The lion, for instance, along with Luther, just disappears from his resting place on the rock. No preamble, no real lead up, he's just gone. How did he get past everyone? If the Watchers in the Dark can just get past all of the Dark Angels that are guarding them, then what in the hell is the point of even having prisoners on the rock? Problems on top of problems. And this is before we get to the two main issues with the lion's return as it is. So, with the lion being on the rock, we have set up a perfect return already. The main issue is, Games Workshop have already used that return once with their other Primarch who has returned on the Loyalist side. A shame. A shame. There are other ways to do this, however. I, for instance, would have the rock crash landing on a planet almost, and shearing off parts of it that the lion is in. He falls down, bang, and he's awoken on this weird planet by the Watchers in the Dark as the rock takes off again, minus the lion. You could do it that way. That easy, right? Multiple ways to do it, but it actually makes sense, rather than having the lion just disappear because reasons. Number 2. Esoteric nonsense forests. We've already covered this so far, we've read about it, but let's jump into it, shall we? I'm going to just put this out there, I'm going to put it out there right now. Aside from the Emperor bit, that I quite like, I hate the forest in the mind idea. I don't like it. I don't like Mira Caliban. It's something that a college student would come up with in their creative writing class to make themselves look clever or deep, and it does neither. Instead, it's an irritating and confusing idea that only adds to the ridiculous nature of 40k's setting. We already have the warp and the webway. We can't just start adding things into the setting that allow one person to traverse space instantly. Right? It's something like the eagles in Mordor in Lord of the Rings. If the lion can do this, why isn't he just going around all of the war zones in the galaxy and clapping Chaos cheeks? There are ways to achieve the same effect of the lion's return without resorting to this confusing and befuddling dream sequence. I mean, I skip dream sequences in most books, unless they sound like they are one of two things. 1, short, and 2, relative to the plot. For the most part, the lion's trips through the forest are neither, and end up teleporting him cheaply to exactly where he needs to be at exactly the right time. It is a mental MacGuffin designed to help lazy writers put the lion wherever they want, and wherever they want, and whenever they need him. And it sucks, right? It absolutely sucks. There could be... We could have this forest in the mind. We could do, right? We could have that in the books, as long as it doesn't lead to very real teleportation powers. That's silly. That's silly, and it's never explained. Even the lion doesn't know what it is. It could be the Watchers in the Dark. It could be where they live, you know, in the warp. That'd be cool, right? The Watchers in the Dark do say it's home, so maybe it's their home, maybe it's the Lion's home, maybe it's Caliban. We don't know, right? Caliban is instantly linked, and I can see, as a writer, I can see how I would make this work. Even if we're keeping the forest as a mental thing where he can traverse, where he can actually teleport, I would make it that. It's the home of the Watchers in the Dark in the warp. The Watchers in the Dark are warp entities, they're not aliens. Okay? I would have the Watchers in the Dark be cast-offs of the failed attempts to make Primarchs. That's what I'd have them be. So when the Emperor was trying to make his Primarchs, he had many failures. The souls of those failures were diminutive and small, because they were children, and they would go into the warp, and they would eventually coalesce and find each other in the warp, and make their own little pocket dimension in the warp, which resembled Caliban. It resembled something like Caliban, right? And these guys, they latch on to the first one of their brothers to be born, and to actually make it. The Lion, right? That's why the Watchers in the Dark don't really care about any other Primarchs. They care about the Lion because they see him as their one true brother. He was the first one of them to succeed and be a Primarch. He was the first one. And so they latch onto him, and they help him. They even have, they even come to settle on Caliban with him, and and they're weird, and they're there, but they're just around. And they make their own pocket dimension resemble Caliban. Right? Cool. That would be a decent way of doing it, of explaining it. But here's the thing, guys. Here's the thing. I'm a writer. I can do that. I teach writing. I teach history and writing. Those are the two things I teach. So I already have a mind that makes connections, that makes those historical connections to things. That's what historians do. They see causality. They see, okay, that happened there, so that must mean that this happened there. Did that happen there? Oh, yes, it did. We found more evidence for that. Cool. Right? That's the kind of brain I have. Not everybody will have this narrative brain that can sit there and work through the kinks of this. To a lot of people, this forest of the mind is nonsense. It's not technically for me, but I know I don't write for me, I write for an audience. I write for me and an audience, really. But it's mainly writing for an audience, and that's where this falls down. It is a decent idea made by somebody who literally thinks they're more clever than they are. I'm going to just come out and say that, right? This writer thinks that they're more clever than they are. It is a decent idea, but it is too esoteric, it is too nonsensical, it is too wishy-washy. And it is not what we were promised with the lion sleeping within the rock. That's not what we were promised. We were promised the lion waking up and kicking ass. Okay? If you wanted to do this dream sequence of the forest, have it be a decent portion of the book, but it's the portion of the book where the lion is fighting to wake up. And when he reaches the end of the forest, he wakes up in the rock and starts clapping Chaos cheeks. He's the one who stops Vashtor from getting the last part of the key that's in the rock. Okay? Because right now, that key that Vashtor is doing does fuck all. It does nothing. It's just a MacGuffin again. Right? Maybe he destroys the key. But anyway, he fights Vashtor off. That's how he comes back. That would be a good way of keeping your forest intact, but also making sure that things make sense. It's the teleportation that I've got a serious problem with. Because all it does is it allows a lazy writer to put the lion wherever he wants the lion to be. Alright. The third one, and possibly the greatest issue with the lion's return that I can see. This is the third one. Too many cooks. So, the forest is not the greatest issue with the lion's return. We've seen how we can make it work with a few minor changes here or there. The biggest problem would be the way he has acted since his return. Because, what do we know of the lion from the Horus Heresy books and his Primarch novels? Well, let's jump in. Number one, he doesn't trust easily. And when he does, it usually ends up badly for him. Hello, Perturabo and Luther. Number two, he doesn't like politics, and when he indulges in them, it usually ends up badly for him. Hello, attempt to be War Master after Horus's inevitable fall, and Imperium Secundus, the entire thing. Number three, he is not forgiving of traitors, no matter their reasons for turning. Loyalty is everything to the lion and is its own reward. Number 4. The lion is a hunter, a duelist, and a knight. He is a slayer of the greatest threats in the galaxy, but is not Vulcan. He could care less for the general Imperial citizenry. They are quite frankly beneath his concern as a slayer of massive warp entities. This is a man made to kill big monsters. This is a man who was ready to annihilate Macragge, the most heavily populated world in the Imperium besides Terra, on the simple off chance that Guilliman sought to supplant the Emperor. He had his forces and exterminatus primed and ready to go. To hell with the people who live on the world. A traitor lives here, the entire world must be nuked into nothing. That's who this man is. He's that ruthless. Number 5. He is a man who has seen half of his own legion turn against him after arriving too late to save the Emperor at the Siege of Terra. Imagine the rage within somebody like this against traitors at this moment in the story when he wakes up. Alright, now, explain to me why, after returning to the 40k setting, right, the lion is doing 2 main things. Number 1, building an empire that rivals the Imperium. Number 2, immediately forgiving most of the Dark Angels who turn against him in the Horus Heresy. Why is he doing those 2 things? Because that original character, I've read all of the Dark Angels books. I love the lion, he's one of my favourite Primarchs. Explain to me why that character that we just talked about is making those 2 decisions. I do not care if the Fallen are telling the lion that they were lied to, or even if they're giving him visions that they were lied to. I'm going to quote here, the words of a traitor are worth nothing, less than nothing. Unquote. This is a literal quote from the lion in Unremembered Empire. Unfortunately, that book is the only real book in which we get to see the lion in any deep or meaningful way, aside from the awful initial Dark Angels books in the series. By the way, those initial books, Descent of Angels, right, and the other one, those are good science fantasy books. They're just terrible 40k books or 30k books. They're not good books. They don't deal with anything that even happens in the Horus Heresy, right? So, you know, why would a character such as this do such a sudden about-face? There's no real reason for it. There's no rhyme or reason for it, and that's why I've got such a huge problem with it. The issue here, before anyone says, what do you mean he can't change? No. The issue here is not that the change in the character happens. That's not the issue. Characters change due to what happens to them. But you need to show us that change occurring over time. Not just blindly tell us that after a nap, the lion is not completely changed, is now completely changed in some of his most fundamental worldviews. What you're telling us is, after sleeping, the lion is now completely changed who he is. Overnight. Literally overnight. Right? I don't care if he slept for 10,000 years, he doesn't know that. You're telling me he just wakes up a different person? There is nothing wrong with a more forgiving lion existing. Absolutely not. He can forgive all of the Fallen if you want him to. The issue comes when the changes arrive with no rhyme or reason to them. There's no foreshadowing. It just happens. Instead, much like the ridiculous forest in the mind, the changes to the lion seem to happen because the writer and Games Workshop need them to happen, not because they naturally occur as part of the lion as a growing character arc. That's the issue. That's the main issue here. Alright? That's what's going on. There's nothing wrong with seeing a character grow and develop over time. The issue comes when we're seeing a character change like that, suddenly. And he's only changing because the writer needs him to change. It's very much like the Forest in the Mind, as I just said. The only reason that exists is to get this character from point A to point Z, without any effort whatsoever. It's also made to compress the timeline so the lion can have his own pseudo Imperium Secundus, right? Which he doesn't need to have. In fact, he wouldn't do that. We categorically can say from our empirical evidence that this character would not act that way. So what gives? In essence, when it comes to the lion, much like the rest of the Horus Heresy, too many cooks spoil the broth. So many writers have written about the lion and his worldview that, much like other Primarchs, we are dealing with a completely different people depending on which writer is telling us about them in the overall story arc. Aaron Dembski-Bowden's Lorgar, for instance, is a completely different person to John French's Lorgar. Now, I know Chaos Corruption can change a man, but not as much as we see in the novels. It's ridiculous. The Lion is simply somebody who has gone through this unfortunate change, which is why the Horus Heresy and Games Workshop in general should have writing teams for different areas of the lore, dedicated writing teams for different areas. The Lion should have 1 or 2 writers at most dealing with him and just him and how he reacts to the lore as it develops. Not an entire team of writers who barely pass their English GCSEs, because that's how it reads. And quite frankly, let's be honest, I think he deserves a lot more. There are ways that these ideas can work. There are definite ways that these ideas can work and work beautifully within the lore. You can have the Lion fighting Angron, you can have the Lion coming back, but he doesn't have to come back in this way. So what would I do? Well, I've already done a big exploration of that over on another video where I've talked about the Lion and Luther being twins. So they are twins, Luther is the Psyker and the Lion is the Warrior, but they are twins. Literally the same person in different bodies. And I'm going to work my reply into that narrative, okay? Because I know what people are going to say about this is that, the Lion wakes up in my lore and he goes and finds Angron and fights Angron. Yeah, that's literally what I would do. I would have the Forest of the Mind occur. The Lion wakes up on the rock as it's being assaulted by World Eaters and Angron. Let's just have Angron in there as well, right? And he fights off Angron, he fights off Vashtor, off they go. And let's give Vashtor the key, why not? Vashtor can get the key to do whatever he is with that stupid MacGuffin. He can get that and he can go away. And now the Lion's back, hooray, right? And the Lion can now develop his character over time as he sees what the Imperium is like. Eventually, bit by bit by bit by bit, he starts seeing what the Imperium has turned into, and he starts to say, okay, were the Fallen really fallen? What's going on here? And he works out his way. And the thing that turns him off is that he sees how ridiculously mental the actual Dark Angels are. And he says, these don't resemble my sons at all. Right? And that's where we go. Because some of the Dark Angels actively don't recognise the Lion anymore. Which is huge. Right? They don't recognise him anymore. They think it's some sort of heretic trick. Right? Let's do that. That's what I would do in the official 40k setting. So what would I do in my own Exile verse? Well, the Lion is asleep, and Luther is at large. Right, he's gone, and he's starting to pool all of the fallen to him. Right, he's starting to bring them all to him. Luther's fall was very real in our setting, and the reason why he beats the Lion is because he's a literal Primarch. Luther is the twin of the Lion. He's a Primarch and he's a Psyker. So he is, again, he has a much higher ceiling. The Lion is the more powerful warrior, but Luther has a much higher ceiling of power that he can go to. He is out there now, he is regretful, he's kind of broken in his mind, and he's pooling the fallen to him, and it's him who creates the Risen, not the Lion. So Luther starts creating the Risen, and not the Lion. People think the Lion has returned, but they haven't, it's Luther. And Luther is walking around, calling himself the Lion, trying to give people hope. Trying to give people something to hang on to, because he thinks the Lion is never coming back, right? Okay. Then we have Angron attack the rock. That happens. We then cut to a dream sequence in the Forest of the Mind, where the Lion is led back to consciousness by the Watchers in the Dark and the Old King. That's a pretty cool thing. That's going to be in my story as well. So the Old King is there, and he leads the Lion out and says, one day you need to come back here and get me out of here so I can help you. But right now you're not strong enough. You need to go back and kill your brother. And what he means, and what the lion thinks he means, is Luther, right? Yeah, Luther. And the old king goes, no, and pushes him back into the rock. So he wakes up, and he realizes, oh shit, Angron's here. Angron's here, clapping cheeks. Those two have an amazing duel, right? And I'm going to give the lion a loss here. The lion has just woken up. So Angron beats him into a bloody smear. Absolutely beats him into a smear. But in doing so, the lion pulls him into a part of the rock that he then detonates. And basically blows Angron out into space, essentially, right? Blows him out into space, defeats his corporeal form. But also, the lion is incredibly wounded. And he has scars down one side of his face. He's like an incredibly wounded warrior, right? It takes months for him to even start to recover his preternatural, even with his preternatural healing abilities. It takes months for him to even start to recover, and he looks aged. He looks old, right? Because that's what's taken out of him. And eventually, at the end of that book, we set up the fact that he finds that there is another Lionel Johnson out there uniting what is turning into another Imperium. Right? Luther has his own realm out there that he's making with the Fallen. And the lion goes apeshit. And that is the end of the first book about the return of the lion. Guys, I've just made that up on the fly. I just made that up as I've gone through all of this evidence with you. And now on the fly, I thought, as a little aside, at the end of the video, I would do what I would do in the Exileverse. How I would change it around to fit this story. It's done. I'd buy that book. I think that was a pretty cool story. I'd buy that book. That sounds cool, right? It needs work, of course. It needs refining. It needs work. There's lots of cheating in there, you know, and they fight sort of a thing. But I think it would work. What do you guys think? Do you guys have any other ideas that you'd bring forward for the Lion's return? Are you angry with how it's gone, like I am? Because once more, Games Workshop I've been given chicken dinner, and they've made chicken shit. So what do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section down below. I love you all a long time. I'll speak to you tomorrow for some more Hobby Nightmares. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you then. Have a good one. Bye.